Hi everyone, it's John. Welcome back to my channel. And I know it's been several weeks since I've posted a video, but you can always count on me to be brought out of my YouTube slump by the first day of a new Historathon quarter. And today is one of those days. It's July 1st. And as you know, since last year, I usually try to post my pile of possibilities on the first day of every quarter. Just to reiterate, this is more of a pile for you. I will draw from it freely as mood dictates, but these are 10 things that just struck me as I was looking at my bookshelves and just sort of pulling things off that I thought might have some interest for people that watch this channel. I try to get a somewhat diverse selection of books. I've got a little bit of history of science, a little bit of literary biography, maybe not as diverse and wide-ranging list of suggestions as I've had in the past, but I still think it's pretty decent. You can let me know in the comments. I have 10 books here for you, and as you know, Historathon is an ongoing year-long reading event, and from July through September, we're reading stuff all about or by people who were living at events about years from 1500 to 1820 AD. So, yeah, like I said, I have 10 things, and I haven't read any of these. In the past, I've usually read at least one or two things I'm recommending, but I haven't read any of these, so I'm going to lean into some advertising matter that I've just pulled offline about some of these books to better summarize what looks to be in them. So, let's see, how many books have I obligated myself to? I think one. This first one, I've promised I'm going to read with someone else, and I'll show you the other one I've sort of promised to myself I want to read too. This I got from Hamilton Books last year, after having seen it around a couple of times, and it is The Enlightenment, The Pursuit of Happiness, 1680 to 1790 by Ritchie Richardson. And The Enlightenment often gets cast as expressing a set of ideas about rationality and reason, but Ritchie Richardson makes an argument in this book, apparently, that it was very much about trying to achieve greater amounts of social happiness and social improvement. And in it, he looks at some of the campaigns and social movements that tried to do that, like the fight against capital punishment, the attacks on witch trials, to try to make his point. It's a lot more than just capital punishment and witch trials, as you can probably tell from the size here. But it's maybe a look at some of the social aspects of the Enlightenment instead of just the maybe more strictly philosophical aspects, if you can make sense of such distinction. Okay. So, another gigantic book. I haven't read anything on the French Revolution in a long time, and I've been looking for that book by Simon Schama, the one with citizens in the title. You know, his 1,000-page long history of the French Revolution that is completely skipping my mind at the moment. But I thought, well, I could find this. It was easy to reach on the bookshelf, and it's looks to be of a similar scope and length, so this will do instead. I don't want to have to go digging around in the garden shed for the Simon Schama book. This is Revolutionary Ideas, an intellectual history of the French Revolution from the Rights of Man to Robespierre by Jonathan Israel. And you might know Jonathan Israel's name. He has written a multi-volume history of the Enlightenment. I think it's either 3 or 4 volumes. Each one is something like 800 to 1,000 pages long. He's a big proponent of Spinoza, as you can tell if you've read those books. But historians of the French Revolution used to take for granted what was also obvious to its contemporary observers, that the revolution was shaped by the radical ideas of the Enlightenment. Yet in recent decades, scholars have argued that the revolution was brought about by social forces, politics, economics, and culture, almost anything but abstract notions like liberty or equality. In Revolutionary Ideas, one of the world's leading historians of the Enlightenment restores the revolution's intellectual history to its rightful central role. Drawing widely on primary sources, Jonathan Israel shows how the revolution was set in motion by radical 18th century doctrines, how these ideas divided revolutionary leaders into vehemently opposed ideological blocs, and how these clashes drove the turning points of the revolution. So, looking at nearly 900 pages with notes and everything all said, but it's something I'm certainly interested in, even if I don't get to it. And this is something I've promised myself to read. I was sent this by Princeton. As you know, I'm a big proponent of Princeton University Press, and at the beginning of the year they sent me 4 books, one for each quarter, and I've already showed this on my channel, but I do want to do them a small gesture and actually read it and talk about it, because it looks absolutely fascinating, and it's the least I can do for a free book. This is Knowledge Lost, a new view of early modern intellectual history by Martin Mulsow. Until now, the history of knowledge has largely been about formal and documented accumulation, concentrating on systems, collections, academies, and institutions. The central narrative has been one of advancement, refinement, and expansion. Martin Mulsow tells a different story. Knowledge can be lost, manuscripts are burned, and oral learning dies with its bearers, and new ideas are suppressed by censors. Knowledge loss is a history of efforts from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment to counter such loss. It describes how critics of ruling political and religious regimes developed tactics to preserve their views, how they buried their ideas in footnotes and allusions, and how they circulated their tracts and treatises in handwritten copies, and how they commissioned younger scholars to spread their writings after their death. So how to counteract lost knowledge or censorship, or the tamping down of knowledge proliferation, I guess, in the early modern period. Fascinating stuff. Ran across this in my library book sale the other day. Don't really find books of this quality, I mean, intellectual quality or physical quality, to be quite honest. There, excuse me. I iced some jasmine tea earlier today, and it's perfect for 100 degree days like this. This is The Classic by Bernard Bailyn. Certainly one of them. If you know his name, it's probably because of this book. It's The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution by Bernard Bailyn. The enlarged edition, I guess. The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution, which has maybe not unique, but very close to unique distinction of winning both the Pulitzer and the Bancroft Prizes, has become a classic of American literature and American historiography about the Revolution. Hailed at its first appearance as the most brilliant study of the meaning of the Revolution to appear in a generation, It was enlarged in a second edition to include the nationwide debate on the ratification of the Constitution, hence exploring not only the founders' initial hopes and aspirations, but also their struggle to implement their ideas in constructing the national government. This one has a new preface, apparently, in which Bernard Bailyn reconsiders salient features of the book and isolates the founders' profound concern with power. In pamphlets, letters, newspapers, and sermons, they returned again and again to the problem of the uses and misuses of power, the great benefits of power when gained and used by popular consent, and the political and social devastation when acquired by those who seize it by force or other means and use it for their personal benefit. And I will just leave that there and not comment any further about possible contemporary issues there. Next, sort of another classic, written in roughly the same time period, actually. Another book I've always wanted to read. This is Religion and the Decline of Magic by Keith Thomas. I think I found this at a library sale many years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, for just a song. And it's one of those books I can never really find online for less than, in good condition, $25 or $30 or $35. So, needless to say, I just snatched this up as soon as I saw it. Witchcraft, astrology, divination, and every kind of popular magic flourished in England during the 16th and 17th centuries. From the belief that a blessed amulet could prevent the assaults of the devil, to the use of the same charms to recover stolen goods. Sorry about the glare. At the same time, the Protestant Reformation attempted to take the magic out of religion, and scientists were developing new explanations of the universe. Keith Thomas's classic analysis of belief, held on every level of English society, begins with the collapse of the medieval church and ends with the changing intellectual atmosphere around 1700, when science and rationalism began to challenge the older systems of belief. So, and unfortunately, the first couple of hundred pages are intermittently highlighted, but like the last 2/3 of the book is not. So I will deal with that if I get to it. I'm only starting to realize how many kind of minor classics I picked. Another book written maybe 10 or 15 years after Religion and the Decline of Magic, 15 years roughly after that, is about the founding of Australia. And Australia as a British penal colony, essentially. And this is Fatal Shore. Robert Hughes's The Fatal Shore. The epic of Australia's founding. Digging deep into the dark history of England's infamous efforts to move 160,000 men and women thousands of miles to the other side of the world in the 18th and 19th centuries. Hughes has crafted a groundbreaking definitive account of the settling of Australia, tracing the European presence in Australia from early explorations through the rise and fall of the penal colonies, and featuring 16 pages of illustrations and 3 maps. The Fatal Shore brings to life a history of the country we thought we knew. I would never make that claim. I never thought I knew Australia. But haven't visited, haven't ever read a book about the country, I don't think. But I know about this, I know its reputation, and I've never heard anyone say a negative thing about it. So, this. Okay. You know me, and you know this channel and its interest in the history of science. So I have to have some history of science. philosophy of science. And this is one of those. It's Leviathan and the Air Pump. It is a Princeton Classics reprint, by the way. Leviathan and the Air Pump. Let's see, it's hard to read the subtitle against the white. Hobbes, Boyle, and the Experimental Life. That is Thomas Hobbes, the philosopher associated with his book, The Leviathan, and Robert Boyle, the famous experimental scientist. Boyle's Law, all of that. And this is by Stephen Chapin and Simon Schaefer. Leviathan and the Air Pump examines the conflicts over the value and propriety of experimental methods between two major 17th century thinkers. Thomas Hobbes, like I said, author of the political treatise Leviathan and vehement critic of systematic experimentation and natural philosophy, which is what science used to be called back then, and Robert Boyle, mechanical philosopher and owner of the newly invented air pump. The issues at stake in their disputes ranged from the physical integrity of the air pump to the intellectual integrity of the knowledge it might yield. Both Boyle and Hobbes were looking for ways of establishing knowledge that did not decay into ad hominem attacks and political division. Boyle proposed the experiment as cure. He argued that facts should be manufactured by machines like the air pump so that gentlemen could witness the experiments and produce knowledge that everyone agreed on. Hobbes, by contrast, looked for natural law and viewed experiments as the artificial, unreliable products of an exclusive guild. So, different views on the philosophy of science and how to do it at the dawn of what we would call modern science. So, Leviathan and the Air Pump. Next book is, I must have gotten this 15 years ago from a friend of mine who was a professor at a university and would be able to get review copies of anything at all I asked for. So he taught political science at the University of Texas at University of Texas at San Antonio, UTSA, as it's locally known. And even though he taught political science, he could just mail a university and say, I plan on using such and such book in this class. Can you mail me an exam copy? That's what they're usually called in academia, exam copies. And when in an exam copy, all you do is say, I plan on using some part of this book, a chapter or an article, and I'm going to get my students to read it. And I'm thinking about making it part of maybe a syllabus so they'll be required to buy this book in the future. Can you send me a free copy so I can look at the book? And I got probably a couple of hundred different books in my library through him because he would just request whatever I asked him for. Very, very generous that way. And this is a book I got from the University of Chicago Press about a figure that you almost never hear talked about, really, and an author I've never heard discussed on YouTube, even though I have a review of one of his books that I did maybe 10 or 12 years ago, close to when I started the channel. The author is Walter Ong, the great Walter Ong, and the writer he's discussing here is Peter Ramis. And this is, again, hard to read print, and I'm getting old. Method and the Decay of Dialogue, from the Art of Discourse to the Art of Reason. Again, it's, excuse me, still in its cellophane because I've never read it. And if books come in cellophane, I don't remove the cellophane until I plan on reading the book. So, again, apologize for the glare there. But Ramis was a Renaissance logician, a philosopher, a humanist and a teacher. He lived in the 16th century, born in 1515 and died in 1572, and is probably best known for his rejection of Aristotelian logic and its application to the humanities. But he also had sort of radical, fringe, pedagogical theories and a sort of bizarre ideas about rhetoric. His work, which was published in Latin and translated into many languages, has influenced the study of Renaissance literature, rhetoric, education, logic, and in the past 50 or 60 years, media studies, actually. And this is considered one of Walter Ong's most interesting and important works. Ramis' method in the Decay of Dialogue is an elegant review of the history of Ramist scholarship and Ramis's quarrels with Aristotle. A key influence on Marshall McLuhan, that's where your media theory comes in, with whom Walter Ong enjoys the status of honorary guru among technophiles. This challenging study remains the most detailed account of Ramis's method ever published. I have heard it's a difficult book to understand, but probably half of it is notes and annotations, bibliography, index, all of that stuff. So I'll give it a try. Let's, who wants to take bets in the comments as to whether the Cellophane's going to leave this book? I don't know. It's probably time after well over a decade. Okay, 2 more books. I have 4 or 5 books by this author, and I haven't read a single one yet. He used to be at Harvard University. His sort of métier is early modern English literature, and his name is Leo Damras. This is his biography of Jonathan Swift. Again, with the obligatory glare in all of its glory. There you go, glare. This is Jonathan Swift, His Life and His World by Leo Damras, which won the National Book Critics Circle Award. Jonathan Swift is best remembered today as the author of Gulliver's Travels, of course, the satiric fantasy that quickly became a classic and has remained in print for nearly 3 centuries. Yet Swift also wrote many other works, and was a major political and religious figure in his time, and became a national hero, beloved for his fierce protest against English exploitation of his native Ireland. What is really known today about the enigmatic man behind these accomplishments? Can the facts of his life be separated from the fictions? In this deeply researched biography, Leo Damras draws on discoveries made over the past 30 years to tell the story of Swift's life anew. Probing holes in the existing evidence, he takes seriously some daring speculations about Swift's parentage, love life, and various personal relationships, and shows how Swift's public version of his life, the one accepted until recently, was deliberately misleading. Swift concealed aspects of himself and his relationships, and other people in his life helped to keep his secrets. So, I have this. Damras wrote a book about Alexis de Tocqueville, which I reviewed several years ago on this channel. He wrote a biography, not a biography, but sort of, well, has biographical elements of William Blake, which is another figure he's interested in. He, like I said, his thing is, mostly 17th and 18th century British literature. So, Leo Damras's biography of Jonathan Swift. And last, another book I ran across at a library sale, saw the name, the author's name that is, and thought, oh, well, it must be another novel, because I only know this name, or at the time associated with one other book, and that's Darkness at Noon, which you might know was written by Arthur Kessler. So I thought it was, another piece of fiction, and it's not. It is nonfiction by Arthur Kessler, and this book has been mentioned maybe on his channel. I know I've talked about it with Brian. Brian, I think you've sung this book's praises, and that's part of why I picked it, because I think I may have read a few bits and pieces of this, but never systematically. And I think I remember you saying you really enjoyed it, because I have a sort of glimmering picture of it in my mind. But if I could find Brian's channel, I will link it in the comments. But this is The Sleepwalkers by Arthur Kessler, a history of man's changing vision of the universe. And this is a history of, sort of a synthetic history of the history of cosmology, roughly, history of astronomy, from the Babylonians to Newton. And as I understand it, most of it falls within our time period here. So at least a good chunk of it will be after 1500. He shows how the tragic split between science and religion arose, and how, in particular, the modern worldview replaced the medieval worldview and the scientific revolution of the 17th century. And he also provides vivid and judicious pen portraits of a string of great scientists, and makes clear that the role that political bias and unconscious prejudice played in their creativity. So you have all of the usual suspects, I would guess. Kepler, Galileo, Tycho Brahe, Galileo, Newton, and those are just the names that are popping up in the chapters and subchapters. So, had no idea that Arthur Kessler had written nonfiction, and he's probably written more than this, but I'm glad I found this. And that is my 10th book. Like I said, I will probably be reading other things along with some of these, but if you have any idea of what you plan on reading over the next 3 months, if you're participating in Historathon, and by the way, Historathon is a really, really wonderful thing. If you're not careful, it can sort of dominate your reading. I've spent the last year and a half, it's really sort of shaped my reading over the last 18 months. And I've loved that it's done that, because it's sometimes formless and directionless. But it's given my reading a bit of a drive, and also the Discord is just wonderful. It's really active, especially in the first few weeks of, the first couple of months of the year, and the first few weeks of every subsequent quarter too. It's really chatty, new recommendations, discussions of what we're reading about and talking about. But if you haven't joined in, I really encourage you to, because it is fun. And I promise you, anyone who's subscribed to this channel, or has made it 29 minutes into this video, is probably interested in at least one or two things from the year 1500 to 1820. And if you can find just one thing, I promise you, there's a book out there for you about that subject. Just a matter of finding it. And if you don't know what that book is, I can guarantee you someone in the Discord will. We're coming up on 170 or 180 members of the Discord. Probably a third to a half of those are active members, and they're on a regular basis. It's a really, really fun place. And it's a place where I try to spend a lot of my spare time, actually. So, I will wrap things up here. I hope 30 minutes hasn't been too much of your time. And I will talk to you very soon. I have some upcoming stuff. Work is at a lull now. So it's been a while since a video, but I have many, many reviews to catch up on. So over the next month or two, you will be bombarded with the stuff I've been reading over the past, well, 6, 8, 10 months, because I've, as you know, been really behind on reviews, but I've been writing them. I was on vacation for 3 weeks, and I wrote, I think, 6 or 8 of them, and I'm planning on writing even more soon. So I will see everyone very, very soon, much sooner than 6 more weeks. Bye.